Coogs House. All right. The Houston Cougars saw a couple of offensive linemen officially commit elsewhere this weekend. So, what does that mean for the big men in the room?
You are Locked On Cougs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Cougs, the daily podcast all about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Ainsworth, that break down all things Cougs. If you're a U of H fan or just a hater who can step by, please be sure to hit subscribe down below. That way you can get the latest on the Cougs in your newsfeed each and every day. We appreciate you making Locked On Cougs your first listen of the day. Welcome back to the YouTube channel. It's good to see you again. To the everyday, we have a whole bunch of fun stuff in store this week. We'll talk some about Big 12 and does that realistically help Houston get towards a national title. We'll talk about some spring sports action, football transfer portal and stuff like that. Today's show in particular got some more fun and all that stuff, but make sure you subscribe down below to make sure that the latest in the Cougs in your newsfeed each and every day. Remember, we're giving away one of these hats, much like the one I have on, little Cougar paw on the front, Nike dry fit stuff, got the Locked On sign on the side, all that kind of stuff for you to make sure we give that away at 1,250 subscribers. So make sure you hit subscribe and then like and comment to let us know you're in the contest. If after listening to some stuff about football transfer portal and the baseball team, you are all out of words, have nothing else to say, tell us if you like pulp in your orange juice. All right, so today's episode, we're going to talk some about guys that left in a sizable first chunk and first segment. The second segment, I want to talk some about what does that mean for the big men on campus for the football team. A lot of questions about that all offseason long. Did get an addition over the weekend, but what else is still left to come? And third and final segment, I want to talk some about the chaotic baseball weekend. I feel weird saying that after a couple of wins, but it was kind of a chaotic baseball weekend. But first, we do need to talk about the news at the top here. Former Houston Cougar Cameron Johnson has committed to Missouri in the transfer portal. His buddy Trevonte Sylvester has committed to Cal in the transfer portal. Let's break these down one at a time. On Saturday, Cameron committed to Missouri. He had offers from USC and Colorado. And remember, he took a visit to Colorado about the same time Alton McCaskill entered the transfer portal himself, running back Alton McCaskill entered the transfer portal, remember, and all that Twitter stuff blew up. Cameron Johnson was at the center of all of that. And so there was kind of this feeling he might go to Colorado with him. I mean, after all, out of high school, or in high school, I should say, Cameron had a commitment to Colorado for a soft verbal for a while there. I have to imagine adding Dion, the NIL money that brings, and so on. That would have been kind of a natural fit. However, the quote, I think, on his graphic he tweeted out tells it all. He says, "Finish what I started," with a picture of him in all his Mizzou gear. And then in the picture, he tagged a handful of coaches at the University of Missouri, including one, Brandon Jones. Remember, Brandon Jones was the offensive line coach at the University of Houston before, we'll call it mutually, leaving the program in January, going to Missouri. Cameron Johnson follows him to Missouri. Big loss here for the Houston Cougars in that he was from Houston, right? That was a big deal, from Pearland, and was in many regards, a top 5 interior offensive lineman in the transfer portal at any point in this window. So big loss. Admittedly, Missouri did have the worst offensive line by most scout rankings on things like Pro Football Focus, stuff like that, in the SEC. You have to imagine that they feel like adding both Coach Brandon Jones and Cameron Johnson helps improve their offensive line play. Very quickly, by midday Sunday, commit on Saturday, by midday Sunday, you're seeing lots of things saying Cameron is an immediate starter, an impact player for the Missouri Tigers. They even have talks about he may be moving to center. He played guard at the University of Houston and helped lock down that left side. I think center is their biggest, apparently, place of need. And so it looks like he may be slotting in there at center. We shall see. Quickly, Trevonte Sylvester also committed on Sunday to Cal. He was a backup reserve lineman at the University of Houston. Played just 114 snaps last season, primarily on blocking special teams, like field goals, that kind of stuff, right? He had offers from Cal, Purdue, and Louisville. He was on the same visit to Colorado with Cam. And so I think, honestly, if they'd offered, they might have gotten them both that weekend, but they didn't. Sylvester was from Bro Ridge, Louisiana, played defensive tackle there, was kind of a project lineman, started off at 6'5", 230, was up to 6'5", 285 last season. And it kind of looked like he might grow into an interior alignment, even though he is 6'5". He follows Matthew Wyckoff, who we wanted to come be a Houston Cougar. He was a Texas A&M transfer, was a tremendous football player at Texas A&M. He transferred to Cal. Sylvester transferred to Cal. I think it's just pointing out the big thing happening there at Cal is Jake Spavital is the offensive coordinator. If that name is familiar, it's because I made the argument to bring Jake Spavital to Houston as an offensive coordinator just a few months ago. Jake Spavital is familiar with Dana. They coached together at West Virginia. He was the quarterback coach there for Dana, whereas Spavital had been a Cal quarterback coach before then and is kind of now full circle back to the OC. His head coach there at Cal is a defensive guy. And honestly, just in bad luck of things, Houston could have gotten Spavital as offensive coordinator. It seems like if timing had just been a little bit different, he got promoted to the offensive coordinator just weeks before Shannon Dawson left for Miami out of the University of Houston. So like that weird timing of things is kind of just, more of the bad luck that comes with all this. All of this is to say, weirdly, looking at this, yes, Houston lost from the top offensive lineman ranked offensive lineman in the transfer portal. I thought when Cameron entered into the portal that things were going to be worse. And I remember you're nodding. We talked about back when he entered the portal, was Missouri going to be an option because Brandon Jones was at Missouri. And Brandon Jones had a really tight-knit relationship with a lot of these linemen. And for all the flack the offensive line got the last 2 seasons, they were consistently ranked by Pro Football Focus one of the best pass block offensive lines in the country. And so they clearly had a very specific type of guy they were looking for. And Cameron Johnson was first-team All-American Athletic Conference. And my worry was, is he going to pull like the Patrick Pauls of the world with him? Is he going to pull is this a start of a movement? And so while it does finish for Cameron in the same kind of sense where he does finish at Missouri, I believe he'll finish at Missouri, it did get limited to just Cameron and a handful of guys that did mostly backing up on the offensive line. That's not to say those guys weren't going to develop into strong, talented linemen. It is to say, though, that an offensive line that's transferring and transitioning into the Big 12, they're not losing a whole lot of depth and snaps played as much as they're losing potential and Cameron. Now, I will say that I guess technically these things are not over, that Brandon Jones could still be doing some, I'm not saying he's tampering. He's not that kind of a guy or coach, but more just that like kids talk. And once he's got Brandon Jones, or once Brandon Jones has Cam Johnson on campus, things could get nasty and gnarly. So we'll see. I will say I would have thought that would have happened already if it was going to happen. So that Cameron committed to Missouri and is going to Missouri on his own may actually be a good sign for the Houston Cougars. It may actually be something that works out for Houston, or for the best, I should say, for Houston. Now, that's a couple of offensive linemen officially leaving the program over the weekend, although I guess after Cameron tweeted out some stuff, it might have been hard for him to come back. They also pulled in an offensive lineman over the weekend. But first, before we get to that, I got to talk to you about our buddies at FanDuel. So that's because it's the NBA playoffs, and when you're trying to look for some way to get on the action in the NBA playoffs, you got to make a fast break to FanDuel during the postseason. Because right now, new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. It's $1,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. I'm telling you right now, if I'm looking at a couple bets on this, I'm going to, if the Knicks are not going to play Quentin Grimes, I'm betting against them and taking Miami, the points, etc. I'm doing that at FanDuel. Miami favorite 4.5 points. If you can find me some evidence that will play Quentin Grimes and let him guard Jimmy Butler, we can change things around. But until then, I'm taking the Heat. I'm also going to look down at the Sixers and Celtics. That is a 7-point spread for Monday night. That can't be Monday. Tuesday, I'm sorry. But that seems kind of large still. We just saw a couple of those games going down to the wire in the first couple. So I'm going to say Philly +7 is the way to go there. I'm telling you, whatever you want to do, you need to fade me or whatnot, make sure you go do it at FanDuel, because there's no better place to bet all the playoff action than America's #1 sportsbook. Just visit FanDuel.com/locked on and get a no sweat first bet up to $1,000 US. That's FanDuel.com/locked on to learn more. FanDuel, official sports partner of the NBA. All right. So I look at the offensive line, and I think there's a lot of fear about who is leaving the program, what could be coming in, what kind of talent is coming in, etc. And I say this because, like, you lose a guy like Cameron Johnson, obviously top-ranked guy, that's a problem, right? But a lot of the guys that left were development guys that hadn't got a lot of snaps yet. And honestly, I don't know if they were going to get a lot of snaps. I don't mean to say that, like, they weren't ever going to be good, but that next fall, as Houston is playing the Big 12, might not have been the time to show off that talent level. And then over the weekend, they went and got a kid named David Ndukwe. Now, David Ndukwe is a big-time Western Kentucky prospect in my eyes. I say prospect, not player, very, very intentionally. He's got 3 years left. And to be fair to Houston, before I go in too far, it's not just they and I looking at this guy as a high-end prospect. He had been recruited and offered by Kentucky and North Carolina. He had taken visits to South Carolina and Mississippi. Like, there was hope that this guy could be developing into a potential left tackle. I say that to say, like, at a high school, he was 6'5", 235. And in college, he's gotten up to 6'5", 3. She lists at 305 in their site from last season, and some places list him this spring at 313, right? And so he's a growing prospect. And in high school, he was a 3-star defensive lineman. So he's transitioning to a new position, getting a new body, developing himself into a whole different type of athlete. And he's proven to be very athletic and balanced and stable. Now, he hasn't gotten a whole lot of on-the-field time at Western Kentucky. I think that's why people are like, what are we doing here? Why do we get this guy? But some of his practice stuff has been published across the internet if you go look that kind of stuff up. And then B, I look at the write-ups at Kentucky, Carolina, South Carolina, Mississippi, and cross-reference, and Houston is not alone in saying that this kid is mobile, active, athletic, the kind of guy that could continue to develop into a right tackle in the Big 12 one day. I think it's worth pointing out that this kid is a Georgia kid, and so for all the flack that Doug Belk got last season as defensive coordinator, Doug Belk's Georgia connections bring themselves up again very, very clearly. Houston's got a lot of transfers and a lot of high school kids out of the state of Georgia because Doug Belk got those connections. He's got that thing on lock. He continues to bring those kind of kids to Houston in a way that kind of helps spice up and diversify the program. It's nice to have multiple places. We're continuing to work on locking down the city of Houston, and we're doing that, right? We talk about guys from Dekaney and guys from Klein, and we're pulling those guys too. But it's nice to have other options to go get guys from. So I'm really impressed by this kid athletically. I got to say, honestly, he wasn't a horrible pass rusher, too, if you go look at his high school film. But I really like what this signals for the offensive line because at this moment, I do think that it looks like Houston's offensive line ought to be kind of set in their starters. And so you're looking to add guys for depth. And by set of the starters, I mean that the left tackle will be Patrick Paul. I imagine the left guard's Tyler Johnson. Jack Freeman's a mainstay at center. Tank Jenkins at right guard. I'm thinking Ruben Unije will be at the right tackle spot. So what you're looking is like, Pancake Hunter kind of fills in a couple of the different interior spots. Jalen Garth may be competing for some tackle reps across the board, right? Jalen Garth coming in the transfer from Texas. Shamar Habdi-Lee may be competing for some of those. Carson Jones is a young lineman. Does he fit into that mix somewhere? And in the same kind of vein, if you're looking to add athletes that will compete and athletes you can develop, I feel fairly strongly that David Ndukwe is kind of in the same vein of guy. I understand people are, upset that like, hey, I wanted a starter. But truthfully, Big 12 caliber starting offensive linemen were not like very plentiful in this transfer portal class. And say what you want about like the strategy that Dana and company had for, hey, we're going to use the transfer portal window to go get linemen because they might be more ready to play. And there weren't a whole lot of starter guys ready to play necessarily. For all of that, that may be a criticism you want to have one day or whatever. That may be a later episode. They did get guys that they can develop like a Garth, like a Habdi-Lee, like a Ndukwe that will turn, high upside kind of guys. Now, you could argue they have low floors too, but definitely high upside kind of guys. And if you trust Eman Naghavi, if you trust Dana Holgorsen, if you trust the facilities you're building, if you trust the direction of the program, that may actually be the way to go. Now, I say that to say that as I'm looking at this, the room is not done. By my count, they have 13 offensive linemen. Dana has been on record saying they want 16. Now, I say by my count because since spring ball ended, the rosters are all kind of just whatever you can find together on the internet. But I'm counting about 13 guys, and it looks like they need 3 more. I've got 2 more that they need to hand out offers to right away. And one of those guys, a kid named Caleb Johnson at Notre Dame, 6'7", 300 pounds, did not play as a freshman last year, was a 4-star kid at a high school. He will be able to go most places he wants. He's the top-ranked tackle left. I don't know that he starts right away for Houston. He might get some minutes or some snaps in a right tackle. I don't think he beats out Patrick Paul as a redshirt freshman this season. But I could see him coming and competing for the right side. I could also see him being a great replacement once Patrick Paul goes pro, right? On the other side, I see Hunter Deo as an interior offensive lineman, but probably also on the, bigger left side kind of build, a 6'2", 290 Iowa State kid. He didn't see the field last year, but again, was another 4-star kid out of high school. Interestingly enough to me, he is the highest ranked on 2 different, both On3 and Rivals, highest ranked interior offensive lineman left in the transfer portal, has not committed, and as a Big 12 school, Houston would actually be the highest caliber offer in his offer sheet. And so I think that they could actually pull in Hunter Deo. He's an Iowa kid, and so you could sell him on the idea that, hey, we'll be playing near your hometown, right? Because they didn't go that far north for the occasional conference game. I also think, again, like he's got some mid-major group of 5 kind of stuff in his offer sheet because he didn't get to play last year. I'm going to bet on the upside with both he and Caleb Johnson that they were 4-star kids at high school for a reason. You trust your development group. You trust to be able to develop those kids into bigger time prospects. Now, they don't fit your find Houston kids for City of Houston thing, and I know that you don't like that, and I get it, right? That's not what the program is built on. But at this point, it's May 8th. I'm thinking it might be time to just find the bodies, right? We'll see. I'm thinking it might be time to just find the bodies. Now, in our third segment, I don't mean to just completely move on from the big guys, but we're going to talk about them a lot the rest of the spring, into the early summer, and then a whole lot next fall. One thing we got to talk about, though, in the third segment is this baseball team. So let's get to said baseball team. First of all, a great Fetty up there at 1738. So we're moving on to the baseball segment. But baseball entered the weekend with a really, really important contest at Wichita State over the weekend. Now, a really important contest because Houston was, at the time, tied with Wichita State at top of the conference, but had won the earlier version of that series, 2-1. And so it looked like if they won the series of the weekend, they'd be pretty well set. Eastern Carolina had a great week. I should say. And so Houston goes 2-0, seals up first place. That's the 6th straight series win for the Houston Cougars. Big comeback on Friday night in Cinco de Mayo kind of fashion. Took the lead in the bottom of the 8th on an RBI single by Justin Murray. Really, really dramatic finish to that game. Murray would also score later in that inning kind of as an insurance run on a throwing error. But the moment that ball left the bat in the bottom of the 8th, it was an exciting moment. I'm watching on television, but it's an exciting moment. Thank you to streaming services. Really, really fun moment in the end of that game. Then on Saturday in game 2, that was the Drew Bianco game. I mean, what else can you say? Kid had 4 RBIs in just 3 at-bats. Had a 2-run double in the second and a 2-run triple in the fourth. Big game out of him. Houston goes on to win the series 2-0. And you heard that right. Sunday, there was no game. Initially, it was not going to get delayed at all. That was what the Houston baseball Twitter said, that, rain and stop no thing, or whatever the thing that Ryan this said. And then about an hour later, it said, but lightning might, games at 2. And then about 30 minutes later, it said, just kidding, game's at 2:30. About 30 minutes later, it said, just kidding, game is canceled. The game was canceled on Sunday for lightning delays. We're talking about building new facilities. Maybe building an indoor baseball stadium akin to the juice box might be nice. You got the cash? I don't have the cash. But you got the cash? Let's put it down. So after that, Houston obviously takes a big lead over Wichita State. However, after a good weekend by the East Carolina Pirates, Houston has just a 1-game lead over East Carolina. They did win that series at the start of conference play. Remember, we previewed that with Starnes a while back. Really exciting opening to conference play. Houston was kind of in a downslide before then. Houston's last 2 conference series left are with Tulane, who is 7-11 in conference, and Cincinnati, who is 8-10 in conference as of the recording of this. They do have, I think it's a Rice and a St. Houston State game. I might have those backwards as games in between. Either way, those games are also in series that Houston has locked up as far as like standalone offshoot series going on. Houston did have that series win against East Carolina earlier in the season, but East Carolina is the much higher ranked team nationally because they have a much better year-long record. Remember, Houston had a big struggle in that first half of the season with a bunch of pitching injuries and issues with the bats and so on. They kind of found their way against East Carolina to get this run of 6 straight conference series wins started, right? So it'll be interesting to see in that conference tournament that Houston, if they win the next 2 series like they should, will actually be just ahead of them because they'll have the tiebreaker overall with East Carolina. We just ahead of them in the conference seedings, but certainly much lower than them in the national seedings. And honestly, Houston, as well as they've played the last 6 weeks, may need to win the conference to get in. The American Athletic Conference looks increasingly like it's going to be a one-bid tournament to the regionals. And so winning especially if East Carolina wins, because they're the only argument you can make for a second team would be if Houston won and East Carolina had just had some like string of great wins, they just couldn't beat Houston. You might send them both because of East Carolina's national prominence right now. I have a hard time believing that the inverse would happen, unfortunately. So Houston's in control of their own destiny. They just got to keep winning, which is nice. But unfortunately, it looks like they got to continue winning just to get in. And now it'll be fun to watch happen. This college baseball thing, the ding of the aluminum bats, is crazy exciting. But they need to win these next 2 series to maintain that lead over East Carolina, get a better seat in the conference tournament, and then win said conference tournament to get into the regional to continue to work their way to Omaha. Now, I'm going to try and preview that baseball thing as much as I can. But as I'm telling you, as an everyday or tomorrow, we're going to talk some about the Big 12 and the shot like actually making national championship games of the Big 12. We'll do basketball transfer portal talk as that pops up, football transfer portal talk as those things continue to fill out over the course of the week. Lots of things to break down. We also, like this summer, have an NBA draft in which a couple of Houston Cougars are fairly prominent in, and all of those kinds of things. So things don't slow down here for Locked On Cougs. So make sure you subscribe down below. You can follow me at Painsworth512, PAINSWORTH512 on Twitter, Instagram, and all of your social media handles. I'm happy to talk all things Cougs. The Rockets and their coach, the NBA draft lottery is coming up. That's important to them and the Cougars. The Texans had a great draft taking our own Tank Dell. The Astros, Corey Jokes is all right. They're doing okay. Altuve comes back soon, so that's big time for them. All kinds of fun stuff going on today, Houston. So make sure you follow me at Painsworth512, PAINSWORTH512. We'll talk all things Houston. Now, also, thank you for making us your first listen today. I appreciate that a lot. If you're looking for a second listen today, I'm going to recommend all of the stuff Locked On Big 12 did last week. Josh had a guy named Spencer on who's Locked On Pac-12. He on a couple of different times talking about some fun and exciting things going on between the 2 conferences, potentially. More about the different arguments they had. So make sure you check out the arguments they had on Locked On Big 12. It's a really, really fun show. Thank you so much for tuning in to Locked On Cougs today. Locked On Cougs is a primary Locked On Podcast Network. That means your team every day. Go Cougs.